All right, we'd like to welcome everybody out to the Monday, October 9th special board meeting. We will stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we'll call the meeting to order. Mr. Cook?
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Isabeth?
Yes.
Perez?
Here.
Dr. McBride?
Here. I'll make sure the record reflects that Mr. Williams had already had a previous engagement, but will try to join us later if we are still going when he is free. At this time, I'll accept a motion to adopt the agenda. Are there any corrections or additions? So the agenda as stands.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Mr. Cook?
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Isabeth?
Yes.
Perez?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes. Before we get rolling into some of these pieces, Tim, how's our sound? We're good? Perfect. All right, so the action item we have this evening is the NCO ESC Education Service Agreement. I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Richards, can you share about this piece and share why we're bringing it forward this evening?
Yes, so this is for work with the Tiffin Developmental Center. We've had a contract now with NCO ESC to help us provide services to the developmental center. So this is just continuing on that contract. We're bringing it up tonight because truth is we should make sure this gets board approved sooner rather than later. Probably should have brought it up a month or so ago. It got lost in the shuffle a little bit. So we're just trying to be able to bring that up today. There's nothing nefarious. This is a long-standing contract that we've had with the NCO ESC to provide services at the developmental center.
So within this, there's not anything that is different or out of the ordinary from previous contracts that we need to make sure the community is aware of?
No, this is the same contract. My understanding is it was about 5 years ago. I'm going to look to some other people that we worked to 2019 when we actually did this work ourselves with the Tiffin Developmental Center. And at that time, it was determined that it was more prudent for the district to work with the ESC to help provide services.
Any questions for Mr. Richards?
Just commentary. I hope that one day the state will take over the responsibility for that facility. It does serve a lot of kids from across the state. Not familiar with how many from our county, but it's a really big burden, requirement on us to handle these really special needs people when the state should probably, they're probably better suited to handle this than putting it on a rural district like ours. That's very.
While no student is a burden, the cost of the services could be handled by the state.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be burden in a bad way, but we don't have the resources that the state of Ohio has. So.
Any further questions, discussion? Mr. Cook?
Perez?
Yes.
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Isabeth?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes. All right. At this point, it brings us to board discussion regarding the renovation to the track and TCS priorities. So is Mr. Cook or Mr. Richards beginning this?
Thank you, Dr. McBride. I'll start us off. As we know, we've been engaged in litigation for about the past year regarding the situation with our track. My understanding is when it was put in, it was almost immediately flawed. We've sought to redress that through the legal system. A few months ago, we obtained a default judgment from the court here in Tiffin in the amount of $1.2 million. As the board is well aware, there's a difference between being awarded $1.2 million and receiving $1.2 million. We have still not collected that $1.2 million. We have worked through the legal process to try to collect that. And at this time, it does not appear as if our efforts are going to be very successful, very bluntly. The company is threatening to just go into foreclosure or bankruptcy, meaning that we would not have assets to be able to collect. So the problem comes that we still need a track for our kids. We can sit there and be upset about everything that's gone on. We can be upset about the company and how as a school district we've been not taken care of and not protected the way we needed to. But the end of the day is there's a need for our students. And so we need to be able to look at what those are. Mr. Kisbeth knows we are in this support services meeting, and we talk about a number of things that need to be addressed. So the sheet that you have is really just it's kind of a basic version. And there's actually a typo on the one for the spray polyurethane track. I'll have to go back and change that dollar figure because the base improvement is really the $526,000. But there's a lot of needs that we have in our district. I have people say, well, you need to replace the auditorium. The auditorium needs repaired, and it does. It very much does. We need to look at turf replacement. The support services has said if we're going to be replacing the track, it would make sense to replace the turf at that time as well, so we don't move heavy equipment over a brand new track. Makes perfect sense, but that's an additional cost as well. Some of those things that you're going to see on here are already things that we're working on. I am not an expert on Victaulic clamps at the middle school, but you're going to note that we currently run our boilers year-round to prevent leaking happening in our water system in the middle school. So typically boilers you don't have on during the summer months. You turn those off. We have to run our boilers year-round. What happened is, if people remember, we lost power one day this year when we didn't have school. There was a number of things. And when we had that, since the power was off, it wasn't heating the boilers. So we actually had water damage here at the middle school because we lost power and the power couldn't run the boilers. So these clamps will help fix that. But you're going to see we have yearly Chromebook replacements, $200,000. I talked to Tim. That's probably about on the low end, probably. We typically buy about 2 buses a year. That's $240,000. Yet again, that comes out of PI. People have talked about passenger vans. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have some passenger vans for some of our smaller sports to save us money instead of having to take buses? That'd be great, but we need to get passenger vans. We need to replace the roof at Washington. There's stadium improvements that need to be done. You're going to see about $4 million worth of improvements that we anticipate that are necessary at the middle school. Here we are in the middle school cafeteria, and I'd invite anybody at some point in time to just look at the doors that we have here at the middle school, and very bluntly, at the bottoms, they're rotting. So at some point in time, we're going to need to replace doors and windows, and those cost money. And you're going to see a number of different items on here. When you add it all up, it's about $8 to $9 million worth of improvements that, and we're not even talking about the things that would be super fun and exciting. These are things that we really we're going to need to do all of these at some point in time. So as we keep going on, I know Mr. Cook brought up last month about, there's a lease finance option that we can look at, or lease purchase options, where we can take out basically a loan to try to pay for some of these things. But then again, that impacts our general fund amount. So the more that we take out now, the more it hurts our current financial situation. So just looking for some feedback from the board as we move forward about some of our priorities, and Mr. Cook is ready with that lease purchase option, if you want to even discuss that, for how we move forward, and very bluntly, how we could work on prioritizing this list. And like I said, this is not an exhaustive list. That would probably take us too long and would be very bluntly probably more disheartening. But these are some of the major issues that I know I've heard from people in the community, and that when we talk with our support staff, that they think are some of our top needs. So I do have people here. I have Aaron Goebel from Kiefer International to talk about a track and turf replacement. I have Mr. Burns from Energy Optimizers that can talk about auditorium renovations. They've come out and kind of spec'd everything out. The chair that's sitting over there is even a sample chair of what we could put into our auditorium. I think people would notice that it's a significant upgrade over what we have in our current auditorium. So it's really just meant to be a conversation. However, when it comes to the track, we do need to kind of make a decision as to how to proceed, because if we want that work done this summer, we're going to have to sign off on that and get on the calendar so we can get going on that. So I really just wanted to be able to present this, and I've shared this with you guys earlier, so that we could have a more informed conversation. But I really just wanted to have a general conversation to talk about what our priorities are. It's so easy to make these decisions in a bubble, right? To say, well, let's just do whatever track option we want. But anytime we say yes to one thing, we're potentially saying no to these other things down the road. And I think it's just important for us to have some context for that.
So I have some questions. You said that we need to make a decision on the track. The
Yes.
first question is, what happens if we don't replace it imminently?
Right now, we have, I believe, lanes 2, 3, and 4. Bob, does that sound right? 2, 3, 4? Lanes 2, 3, 4, or is it 1, 2, 3? Yeah, I think 2, 3, and 4. Lanes 2, 3, and 4 are barely usable. We have an 8-lane track. So what it means right now is that we really cannot host track events at our school. Nor is it really conducive to have practices on, very bluntly. They made it work last year. This is a problem that we've had experts that have said it's not going to get better with each passing year. It will continue to get worse and worse. So if we do nothing, we basically have a track that is unusable.
So we're going to have to make a decision on track, and we're going to have to do that one now-ish
Pretty much now.
to be able to get the work done in the summer. Otherwise,
Otherwise, we have an unusable track.
We don't
We are
have track.
probably going to have an unusable track this spring. Honestly, there's really almost no way around that. But in order to be able to get this work done so that this is the last year that we have that problem, we need to be able to make a decision now so we can get on the books, so we can get on the schedule, so we can have that work done this summer.
the track we have to make some decision on track.
Correct.
What are the other things on here that if we don't do them, if we decide to hold off on them, has a similar impact?
I mean, roof replacement is always going to be one. If you don't, I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you how long it would last for, but we need to start replacing certain sections, because if we don't, it basically becomes uninsurable for not being able to do that. So we can do that in phases, which I kind of have that as letter J for you guys. We can do that in phases. It doesn't do us a ton. Sometimes some projects you get a discount if you do it all at once at one fell time. That's not necessarily the case for the roof. So it's not a significant cost increase if we want to do that in phases. But I mean, middle school improvements, and I thank Mr. DeVore and the maintenance staff with looking at that Victaulic clamp replacement and looking at replacing some of the operating systems for our HVAC here at the middle school. That's something that I think needs to be done, because yet again, all it takes is one day where we lost electricity for a few hours, and we had, in fact, they may still be up there, we actually had big trash cans that we've had to put in different places to catch the water, not that's leaking from the roof, but that's leaking from our HVAC system and our water system. Yeah, Mr. Cook.
Greg's got the PO in place for that one out of PI, so that one's in process.
These ones out of PI, they're already accounted for?
They're already accounted for. And I wanted to make certain I put those on there because and Dr. Gase, I think you were instrumental in doing this, is what I've been told. But we now have a PI fund, and we get about $1 million a year in PI. And I understand for people in the community, it goes, well, that $1 million, that's a lot of money. You guys should be able to do everything you need to. And the reality is, it basically keeps us moving along barely. I hate to think about where our district would be if we didn't have that PI fund. So, Dr. Gates, I don't know all what went into it. I was told that you were instrumental in that. So,
It's one of those deals where we had a fund that that was permanent improvement, but it had been like 30, no, more than that, like close to 40 years old. And at that time, I think because of the way the inflation had affected it, we were getting like 25 cents on the dollar of what the original intent was. Actually, the original intent was two mills in 1977 or 78. And because then we lost some big industry in town, the next year they took it down to 1 mill. And that one went on renewed for many, many years. And so when we were in, we raised it by 4 to get commensurate with what the original intent was, and then we made it permanent, so we didn't have to get it reelected. So yeah, it's been nice not having to get that back on the ballot again, but still, it's not enough. Yeah, but it is nice to have something earmarked for.
Absolutely. And it allows us to be able to do some of those things like purchasing buses, which we have to do on a regular basis. I would say that fund is meant to just kind of keep us moving along. But the problem is it's not enough money to help us close those gaps that we have. And throughout the course of time, those gaps just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I shudder to think about where we would be if we didn't have that PI fund where it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like quick math, so things not currently earmarked out of PI, we're looking at like 4.6-ish million. That's rough math. Mister?
Well, middle school improvements alone was 4 million.
Yeah.
I don't think I put that in there.
Letter L.
Yeah. See. Sorry, Mr. Kizabis. Still not my thing. Math. So
what you envision with you encumbering already out of the PI? What you already envision encumbering out of the PI in terms of the middle school and stuff, how much realistically do you see us having available for next year?
Right now, in our permanent improvement fund, we've got 925,000 unencumbered.
That doesn't include the middle school, the outlays that he has outlined in here.
No, it includes none of this. That's just simply our cash balance today that is unencumbered.
Then I think you followed up, because that middle school issue came up before in terms of also expending energy that we're, resources as well, because the boiler is on, because the vents are running in terms of efficiency. And how much is that costing us? Does anyone remember?
I saw a figure from Greg off the top of my head. I don't remember, but I would say conservatively $600-700 a month sticks out at me. I mean, it's not insignificant over the course of a year.
I got a question about stadium improvements. Is there a fund, some type of fund or escrow fund that we had for stadium improvements? I thought when they did the original stadium renovation, there was a fund for.
There were 3 phases. We did 1, we did 2, we never did 3.
Never got the third one. Okay, all right.
So thank you, Dr. Gase, for bringing that up publicly, because I've actually been asked that a few occasions, and I've checked with Ryan, and I remember checking with Sharon, is there an account somewhere that we have for money? And I do not believe that's the case. So
There's a fund for the theater that was established years back for some renovations, I believe, but nothing for the stadium.
And this goes back, what, 20 years, 25
least
years
20,
maybe?
yeah.
Yeah, so.
Well, Dr. Gay, someone posted a picture by the plaque back there. And I'd say the majority of the companies that donated don't exist anymore.
Oh.
So I think it's time probably with some of those that we maybe look at a private partnership there, or
Well, that was
field rights or something, because long-term.
Elaine and Bob Hunt were really the ones that spearheaded
Yeah.
that. And
They drove it.
rest of their souls, they're both gone now, but yeah, they drove the whole thing, really. I mean, they were the ones that spearheaded the fundraising.
Yeah, but I think he did point out there is no fund, there's no
Yeah.
foundation, there's nothing out there. It looks like it was a one-time project and that was it. And I think people believe that there actually is something that was created back then.
Yeah.
no, there's been a lot of people that have believed that, because I've been asked that a number of different times. So
I believe the first was the field, the second was the press box, and the third was the restrooms. And the restrooms did not get done. I think since then, we have put some new porcelain in the restrooms, haven't we? We had that stored in the bus garage.
Put in dividers and stuff now, so that's been upgraded.
I think there was some new porcelain put in too, I think.
So as
But I think we need to, I think the stadium's an important thing based on if we look at a building project down the road and the high school's going to stay where it is, that's one of the proposals, then the stadium is a jewel that we have to protect.
So as you think about the financing options here, I had them generate from 500,000 to 3 million, just to kind of give us a range over a 10-year, a 7-year, and a 5-year period. Those payments can be taken out of either general fund or permanent improvement. So there's flexibility between those two, but if we take more out of permanent improvement, then that lessens projects. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. But I just wanted to forecast, give you an idea of what these expenses would be, depending on the priorities and the wishes of the board tonight as we come out of here.
I think one of my priorities is not tapping into general revenue. I mean, we already have the forecast, and I don't want to accelerate it unless we absolutely have to. I mean, I don't know how to do that. That's.
Well, and I think to that point, when we look at track options, we're talking about to put in, we currently had a rubber track that was put in, and the intent was that we'd have one of the premier tracks, I think, in the area. Obviously, that has not happened. In talking with Mr. Goebel and their group, they believe that there's a substantial issue with our base that needs to be addressed, and that base work alone is going to be about $526,000. That doesn't get us a new track. And so then on top of that, so then the options are $802,000 on top of that for a new rubber track, or $325,000 for a spray polyurethane track. What we had prior to this current track was we had a sprayed latex track. That's actually a step down from a spray polyurethane track. I'm now getting way out of my lane, but I will look back to Mr. Goebel to see how I'm doing. If I had to kind of rank it, it would be, cinder track. That's down at the bottom. For those of us that are a little bit older and remember running on cinder tracks, I don't think we should even talk about that.
No.
Spray latex track would be above that. Spray polyurethane track is above that. And then a rolled rubber track is the top. So those are just some different options. But when we talk about that, and Mr. Perez and I respected very much what you're saying on that, but we're talking about 800 and some $1,000 still just to fix the track. And we need to know then, where's that money coming from?
What's the lifespan of the rubber replacement? Lifespan
Of the rubber.
Rolled rubber.
So the rubber after track should be anywhere between the 20 to 25 years.
Yeah. So long range, that's the better deal. But 5 years.
5 years.
5 years for the spray?
And
What's
that
the cost for
spray
the
would
spray?
be, that would be the
Be a full spray. It'd be close to what the
325? Yeah. And how certain are you that if we do the base improvement, we would have, how certain are you that if we do the base improvement that we're going to be, it's going to be sufficiently improved that we won't have the same problem again?
So based on the topography survey that we've taken and the conversations that I've had with Vernon Jones Construction that we work with on something like this, they're really confident through their engineers that the addition of the curbing, the addition of the catch basins, the drainage, it is definitely, to the safe side as far as to make sure that water moves away from the track.
Thank you.
So from a fiscal standpoint, I think we could absorb this out of PI. Obviously, the track is a huge need. I've heard that loud and clear. We'd be looking at, if it's 850,000, somewhere between 100 and 120,000 a year, approximately. We get $1 million a year in PI, so we wouldn't have to compound our general fund deficit with this to accomplish it. I think it would result in further planning on PI on the administrative end, because that's another 120,000 then that we don't have coming in. But I think we can address that immediate need with our PI if we would spread that out over 10 years, for example. We could certainly go less. We can certainly pay it off in advance if our fiscal position would improve. So there's flexibility, there's some options there. But
The lease, correct?
correct.
And then, 'cause I think if we did the track now with the respray, it'll put us like, what, 1 or 2 years off the tennis courts, which I think we're 5 years to as well. So that's gonna be an expense that's coming there too. With the tracks though, we had the rolled rubber, but I thought I read that this kind of track is more popular in like environments like ours that are cold, northeast, stuff like that.
Are you referring to the sprayed structural being more
Correct.
conducive? Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, and that's really why it's a very prominent, track system, especially in the Midwest and colder. And it's, from a fiscal standpoint, it's definitely a more modest cost. So a rubber track made properly doesn't have issues outside
It
traditionally.
shouldn't fall apart like the latex one that we had that cracks and starts falling away.
Yeah, the latex tracks, you don't really see a ton
those
of those
anymore.
anymore these days. It's the sprayed structural is for the most part kind of that baseline to make you feel good that you're putting athletes on something that they can compete on and feel good about. So
Supposed to have more give than the rubber stuff that we had, correct? It's not as hard.
it's in the eyes of the beholder. Statistically, if you were to go and look at the energy return that came out of a 13.5 or 10.5 millimeter rubber track, it's going to be 40 to 50, which is going to be probably actually more than a urethane track. So that's a little bit of a myth as far as that it's a firmer track. Feels a little firmer.
Feels harder. It doesn't feel.
Yeah, and rolled rubber, I mean, traditionally, a lot of people try to label it as a competition track because naturally it has faster times. So,
Thing concerns me about the spray, you said you'd have to do it every 5 years. So in
Correct.
25 years, which is the cost of a Mondo track, you'll have 1.5 million in resprays.
We haven't
So
seen.
over the course of the 25 years, you pay up front and you're done. Or with the spray track, every 5 years to a total in 25 years of 1.5 million based on today's figures.
Paying it either way, because
Yeah,
we're either financing it and paying that out, or we're going to be paying it out over the same amount of the lifetime. Like, so we're paying
correct.
it either way. So the finance person, which way is more fiscally sound? If we're paying that either way, and that's 20 to 25, so not guaranteed.
Right.
If you want to know you've got it done and you don't have to do anything, you finance your 1.5 million and ballpark $195,000 a year, covering that out of permanent improvement. One and done. Don't have to worry about maintenance. You don't have to put it on another school board down the road. Where are we going to get the funds to cover that when you go to spray it? You're going to have inflationary costs with the spray over time. I don't know what that typically runs. Total cost of ownership, all being equal, you're going to have the same cost. It's just, do you want to spread it out with the maintenance cost over time, or do you want to bite the bullet and finance it at approximately 1.5 million?
Now I got another question, and this is a question. What would happen, and I have no idea on this, so just bear with me. We pay for the cost, the 650,000, and we put up to the community in bonds or contributions to pay for the upgrade. Is that a possibility?
So more or less a fund drive, so to speak, saying we'll cover X, we need to raise that. Certainly a possibility. It just would potentially delay that timeline.
Yeah.
That would be the only worry I would have, is your timeline, the sense of urgency.
And I would have a number of worries asking the community for money when we know that we're going to have to go up for a bond and levy. I don't want to.
Yeah, I understand that, but the key to this, to me, it's a particular project, because I look at all the different things that we've done, where we've got the plaques up, these people contributed here, they contributed there. It's a specific, you're targeting a specific group of interested people, not the entire community. That, I know it's a risk, and that's why I hesitated to ask about that, but I know we did that with the fort, and we did it down here with the stadium project. And people like their names on things.
Yeah, I think in the 30-some years been back in Tiffin, I can think off the top of my head, at least a half dozen multi-million-dollar fundraisers for projects, and none of them failed. They all passed, and some much greater than they anticipated, including the universities and St. Francis and ourselves. And yeah, there's the money if you have the right person to spearhead it. I think that's the thing.
And the other side of that coin is, if we could do something that way, we are showing the community that, yes, we understand that our finances are tight. We as a board can do this much. We would like to have the rest of it, but we have a responsibility to our community, to our entire electorate, that there is only so much money levies can bring in.
But I think the concern there is that would be great if we were doing this 3 years ago, but we actually have to get a track out next year.
Understand?
And so are you going to be able to get those agreements in place to get in line to get the track now? And the other problem I have is we went with the bigger the product last time, and it didn't last us. So I can't go to the community and say, well, this track is going to last 25 years when I know I can't say that. We could be here in 10 years replacing or sooner with the other product just as well. There's no guarantee that that's going, I mean, is anybody going to warranty us to work for 25 years and say, if it fails, we'll prorate it and replace it?
So the standard product warranty, like natural wear warranties, 10 and workmanship's 1.
Yeah, so that's even with the higher price, the roll track.
Yep, that's our standard warranty with Mondo.
So that's what you're going to get, even with inflation. So you're looking at 10, so you're getting a resurfacing. I'd rather go with the other product that's been used in the state in cold and is more, people deal with it more. I don't see the rolled rubber track in most of our high schools. I don't see it in most of our colleges here. And I think at some point there's a reason for it. And I don't think the public comes in and goes, that is a great rolled rubber track there. They do notice the turf and they notice the stadium. And I think that if we're going to leverage public contributions, that's probably where it's going to go, where they can see it. Not, I think you get a really good track with that option. And you're right, we do have to spray it, but we don't know what the technology is going to be in 5 years either. So
I will say,
you're off.
I'll talk loudly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Aaron.
Hey, good.
What I will say is, when he says 5 years, that's an expected time. I can tell you that there are school districts that can actually go 10 years without spraying. So it's like everything else. They give you a time frame. It can be more, it can be less. I know a school district that had a spray polyurethane track, and they've been 10 years without having it sprayed. So to your point, there's any of the numbers that they give, it's their job to be conservative, and that's their job as a business, and I get that. But I think what we're bringing up is it's the classic situation that we always get into. Spend money now, more upfront, and potentially save money down the road, or save money upfront, knowing that it potentially might cost us more money down the road. And typically, I think most of us, if we had our druthers, would prefer to save money in the long term. But the problem is in the short term, where's that money come from? If we go with doing the rolled rubber track, one of the things that was talked about is we'd like to potentially put in a new turf at the same time so that we're not going across that.
How far along is that?
We're about 2 years away from needing
2 years from next year, or 2 years from this year?
2 years from the end of this year, I believe. At the end of the season, we'll have 2 more seasons with it.
And how much damage is actually done, and how much can be mitigated by just putting things on top of the track?
I've seen it done.
Yeah.
I think it can
Yeah.
be mitigated.
So it's not a big, it's not,
It can be done.
it can be done.
It can be done.
Okay.
I think
Common practice.
Yeah.
I think there's been some, with good reason, some cautiousness that if we're putting in a substantial amount of money on a new track, to not do anything to potentially jeopardize that investment. But to be fair, companies all the time, and Mr. Goble, you guys it would probably be preferred to put in a new track at the same time, a new turf at the same time as a track, but it can be done to put in a turf after a track is done as well.
Yeah, I'd assume that's fairly common. Like, we're not the only people that would put in turf after a new track is down.
If they can be married up, that's the most.
But for $500,000 up this year as opposed to next year or even the year after,
Which, can someone
probably not that.
educate me on
Important.
the turf piece? So why turf? I know there's a lot of conversations amongst pro ball about how there's far more injuries on turf versus non-turf. Can somebody help me with
See,
that?
this is why we
Is that,
have
is that
Oh,
you
but the
too?
artificial turf?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
why we
I
have
mean-
experts.
Were you around when we used to have natural turf? Probably not.
When was that? Probably not.
Well, it's been what, 15 years maybe? I mean, it's been maybe, well, no, close to 20 years now because it was,
No.
so in the old days when you had junior high, actually had 2 junior highs, you had the high school, 2 high schools, you had, and 2 colleges. So about this time of the year on, there was no grass. It was mud for the last 6 games, 4 or 5 weeks at least anyway. In the middle, there would just be mud. So you would not go back to natural turf. That's not going to happen.
If you want to go back to 1972, when Heidelberg had the really good playoff football team, we had to put straw on the field to soak up the water because there wasn't any grass.
Right. It was frozen.
And to add to what Dr. Gates talked about, with the artificial turf, our spring sports also have places then to practice in the bad weather. So,
Yeah, I mean, and then
But
throwing
small
soccer,
districts
you know,
are
we didn't
going-
have a soccer team back then. We got soccer, more than one soccer
Marching
team now.
band.
Marching band. Yeah, it's, you know, trust
the
me.
artificial surface.
Yeah, it pays for itself with all the extra things you can
And
do.
I think the proposal that you had, that you sent to the board, included a cost for, I think all the talk now is in the underlayment or what goes under it now regarding concussions and stuff, correct?
Yeah, so when you put it, what you would refer to as a shock pad, essentially goes underneath the turf, which does a couple things for you. So really, when you put in a traditional turf field, usually your infill mix is a combination of sand and crumb rubber, which is really the story that people like to talk about a lot. And that takes, by putting a pad underneath the field, it takes the onus off the infill of providing a safe field. So essentially, if you put a pad underneath, I mean, you could shop vac all the infill out of that. And if you were to climb up on a ladder and fall onto the field, you're going to fall onto a safe field. And turf terms, you're going to hear the term GMAX. It's probably what you have done as a district. You have somebody come out and GMAX your field. So essentially what it is body to surface impact and, making sure that that registers under 200 over the life of the field to make sure you have a safe field.
And in that regard, are we having to redo the infill any time? So that's a cost, I think, in maintaining it right now that we have, correct? So it's,
Yeah, there's basically a premise, same as what we've talked about with other things, that you're spending more money up front for a turf versus a natural grass field. However, in the long run, you're actually coming out financially ahead simply because of all the issues that actually Mr. Kisbeth and Dr. Gase kind of explained before. Just wanting to make sure we talk about as well with the auditorium. That's been a need, and that's something that I've heard from the community for a while. We have chairs in our auditorium that are almost not even safe to sit in. I've enjoyed, and I say that with a little bit of smirk on my face, whenever I take architects and engineers through our high school and I show them our lighting system. It is not easy to shock and awe architects and engineers, and they look at that system and they say, can we take pictures? Because we've never seen something like that before. So we know we have a lot of needs in there. And working with Energy Optimizers, they've given us a quote for basically 1.4 million, and I've provided the attachment so you can see all the work that would happen. That's brand new auditorium seats, ripping out the seating, putting in a ramp. Currently, in order to get onto the stage, if it's somebody that's handicap accessible, I think, and I'm going to check around, we basically have to take people into the band room, there we go, Mr. Kisbeth, of course I can use you. Take them into the band room, go back around, go onto the stage through a ramp, and
Back
then
door.
they can be up on the stage, and then they have to leave the same way. The only other alternative is that we could bring them in from the outside.
Yes.
There's a door up there. So that's something that I've been told by a number of people. Like, we need to look at addressing our auditorium. So Mr. Burns is here from Energy Optimizers, Dave Burns, and he and his group have done a lot of work working with lighting, sound, extending the stage, new seating. This is one, though, where we really can't do it a piece at a time. This is one that, because there's asbestos in certain areas and things like that, that when we do it, we kind of have to do it. So if you look at that quote, you can see different sections and go, well, maybe we can just do the seats. And yeah, we could do that, but there's
You
an
could
increased
do
cost.
that. The problem is, though, if you do the seats and then you're looking down the road to do anything above ceiling, your priority now becomes protecting those seats, and it makes it very difficult and costly to do this separate. And we tried to look at that, to do that for you, to phase some of this into 1 or 2 phases. The amount of work and where the work is located, it makes it very difficult to impossible to do. You can't do one without the other. And that's the difficulty of that project, being able to do those things.
Mr. Richards, that's how much of the 250,000 commitment from Mercy do we have on their behalf? Thank you very much.
We have two. Go ahead, Mr.
Just over 200,000, I believe. I think
So they've one more payment,
One
I
more.
think, and thank you very much to Mercy, but that's what they wanted that money for. And so that would go to the project as well. But I know that having been in that theater with students, that electrical work needs to be done. It's like we have one-off stuff and hot lamps that go, and we have kids working on that. And it's not reliable for our shows either.
The auditorium is not safe as it relates to electrical. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
I think when we talk about it's archaic, I don't know if I could go and say it's unsafe. Mr.
Not officially.
Yeah. I've never seen, and I have a background in that area. I've never seen anything like our setup, so I can say that. I would hesitate to say safety for the lighting. What I would say, though, is some of our seating is not safe. We have seats that have they're metal seats and they have some jagged edges and stuff like that. We've had to tear out some of the seats already because they've been damaged beyond repair. So I would say there's probably more of a need seating-wise with safety. The lighting system, though, it is archaic, and they don't even make equipment to support that anymore. So it's a very much a need to replace the lighting. It's very much a need. I would be hesitant when I say the word safety, though. Safety to me when you're talking about electrical system, makes me fear that we're going to have a kid electrocuted. Yeah. I don't think that would happen, but it's just it is an odd system that I don't think you would find anywhere else in the state of Ohio.
It's 60
When
years old.
the building was built, it's built under a certain set of codes. To renovate it, you have to renovate it with the newest set of codes. So you're technically grandfathered in, is the term.
Yeah.
But if you go to renovate any portion of that auditorium, you have to meet it per today's codes. And that's where this process gets a little steeper.
Now, if the asbestos, we're safe with asbestos. as far as
Correct.
that goes. We don't have, as long as we're not messing with it.
Yeah, it's encapsulated right now, but if we were to do any work, that means they have to abate that asbestos, which is an additional cost as well.
Right, I think they were indicating that if they do the electrical, they can foresee getting into that.
Yes.
And so that would protect our seating, because if not, we'd have to do a whole lot of other stuff.
Yes.
My time on the board, which now I'm just at 4 years. So in my time on the board, I know that we've done different athletic pieces. Can you think of the last time we did any updates for the arts?
No, I don't even know if I think we fixed the band room over here so it didn't leak. I think, didn't we fix that? I think we did, because it was leaking, water was getting in, and we said we had to do that right away. We didn't do these here. But aside from that, no. And we've talked about it, but we really haven't. And you got a great point.
I can tell you in the mid-2000s, we updated the sound system in the auditorium. The stage floor was refinished and new curtains were purchased. But I think a lot of that came out of the 018 fund of the principal's account. I don't think the board had much to do with that. We knew that the lighting was next and the seating was next, and that was mid-2000s. And we're now 23 and we're still sitting with those two things not done. In fact, I was on the stage floor not too long, it needs to be refinished again, so we've gone through a whole cycle.
Not only that,
Stuck.
we've also eliminated the fall play.
Yep,
So we've actually taken things away. Yeah.
And I think they did it in high school as well with the art room, so to make
Yep,
room.
yeah.
But I think when you said about the egress for the special, or for handicapped accessibility, when we saw the complex up in Fremont, that had that whole ramp and stuff up there. I would tell you what you traverse probably isn't really regularly feed, because you have to move stuff out there. It's not as big as people think it is. And so at some point we have to do that because, again, we have to accommodate all our students. We just had a band show. I think several of the schools had handicapped children participating in band, doing stuff, and we have to be able to offer the same thing.
So would this be something that would be done off school year? Would we lose a school year? How's that?
All the work that we propose can be done in one summer.
Summer, okay. Super.
An ambitious summer, though.
Oh, yeah.
Ambitious summer.
Yeah.
Ambitious summer. Earlier the
And all
start, the
of
better.
this, all of this could be incorporated into, say we build a new high school and you take away the academic part and you leave that wing, nothing would be altered or wasted.
That's correct. We could let this stay as our auditorium moving forward.
Yeah.
The state does not pay for an auditorium
Right,
space.
right. So that's in our best interest to, take care of it now, I think. I agree with Megan, that we've neglected quite a bit. Well, even for that matter, I thought, and I still believe, that these walls, before we fix those, that should be expanded out. We thought 20 feet, make this cafeteria big enough to take 3 lunch sessions down to 2, thereby giving the middle school students an extra period for classes. And I still think that academically, that is a very good decision for something we have to do anyway.
So with the auditorium projects, so how would you finance that? Because I think to the last levy that passed when we did I think just the emergency renewal, people actually thought that that was going to go towards that. And it was just to maintain operations. So I think the public actually expected something with the auditorium. Now, this wouldn't include any air conditioning because I know that's come up as an issue. But again, I think that goes to the whole building plan or what we're going to do in the future, because that would mean the whole or what we're going to do with that building as well. So
Putting in air conditioning into the auditorium is about an additional $500,000.
Additional $500,000, and it's really extensive labor. You're bringing in cranes, shutting down roads in order to get them up onto the roof. We've got to check the structural soundness of the roof itself, if it can handle the load. I mean, you got a whole lot of extra work to do with it. And if you choose to do it, you've got to incorporate it in what we're trying to do now.
Well, I think since we don't have school in the summer yet, I think we would probably forget that. Yeah.
About 4 to 6 weeks, if that, at the beginning of the school year, and about 3 weeks at the end that are brutal. And I don't think either of those are when we're
Not worth a half.
doing shows or any of the pieces.
it's just used it for the backup for graduation. But I think if we can continue that other backup plan, it's a lot better. So.
So we've got an imperative piece on the track. It feels like we are past a point of it being imperative on the auditorium, which any facilities plan moving forward wouldn't incorporate that because the state doesn't cover those pieces. So it feels like these two very clearly come to the top. It feels like we have a number that are already being encumbered through the PI or already planned for there, which then leaves passenger vans, roof replacement, which can be done in phases, stadium improvements. Can you tell me like the level of imperativeness or priority on these?
We have some cracks within the foundation of our stadium where water has been able to seep in kind of in that underneath area. So we have some improvements that need to be made in order to be able to protect that asset, that resource that we have. Does it have to be done today? No, but it's coming. And at some point in time, it's one of those, it's like everything else. I feel like the story of the Dutch boy and the dam. You know, you try to plug one break here and then 3 other holes kind of pop up. And so at some point in time, and I think what the board is recognizing is what Mr. Cook and I have talked about. Even if we look at financing, even if we do some of these things, we don't have the financial resources to actually take care of all of the problems that our community expects us to take care of. It's not about just being more creative and looking at options. I mean, when Mr. Cook is talking about a lease purchase option, a finance option, yeah, we could take out a loan for $10 million, right? However, and Mr. Cook would be very upset with me if we decide to do that. But there's a cost to that. So yes, it helps us potentially in a short term, but it creates this long-term problem, and now we're financing it.
Yeah, and I think that's it. We have to pay it back. And then the question is, if we want to stay away from general funds so we don't compound our problem on the operating side, we're looking at PI. To do both of those, let's say we're in that $325,000 a year. So we just, in a sense, nuked a third of our revenue coming in on PI every year. So what does that do to some of these other items then that we already have on the books? So that's the balance.
That's why I included with Mr. Weber, with technology, that Chromebooks and technology aren't going away. We're going to need to keep replacing those on a regular cycle, just like what we've done with transportation. So when you sit there and you go, okay, technology and transportation, Chromebook and bus replacements, we're about $500,000 a year that's gone, that we don't even, it's gone.
That's why I couldn't, when I look at the track and go between this and the higher priced, the difference is the Chromebooks. And we have to start looking at it. It's like, yeah, but we've got to buy all these things. You know, on my limited budget, you know, am I going to buy the refrigerator, the stove, and the TV for a normal price? Or am I going to get the OLED TV for $5,000 when I can get everything and at least maintain the household? I think we have to budget things appropriately, but I think the public has to understand we have a lot to do. And I think this has just it's been mounting up on us that this is going to catch up at some day. But I don't think that our resources can pay for the stadium by itself. We're going to need help on that one. And I think Scotty, before he left us, he was saying that we had to recode it. Water's going to get in there, and water's a pain to deal with. Eventually, we'll destroy it. So.
With the tracks, some of these are maintenance. Some of these are things that the community might not see. Like, no one's going to be seeing, I'm not even going to attempt to say
Roof
this.
replacement. No one sees a roof replacement.
No one sees a roof replacement. The track pieces is hosting conferences, is that a revenue generator? And if so, what does that look like?
It does generate revenue. It generates a little bit for a school. It generates more for our boosters programs. And I will tell you, I've talked to Mr. Alvarado because he works with OHSAA as well. Tiffin is very much still the desired location for regional track. And they were intending to bring it back here when we got the new track. And then obviously we've had issues with that. But I can tell you from his conversations that OHSAA is very interested still in seeing Tiffin be the host for regional track. The reality is we have a location and a facility that is very much desired. We have a nice setting.
We've had a facility.
What?
We've had a facility.
Yes.
We've got to
Yes.
get that taken care of.
And I think to touch on something you said, Dr. McBride, having observed track, it's one of the few sports in Springs, it does attract a lot of girls in that. We have like 15 to 20 girls that run hurdles. It's like I think their team is larger than the boys at this point. And everybody can run, and it's a good way to have them doing something involved with the school. And so if the public says, well, just get rid of it, we're just cutting opportunities for these kids to do stuff other than, that's not healthy as well. So
I think fiscally in the short term, we can certainly address the track. We can move that off the list and get it done. We can alleviate that need for the community, and I think we can absorb that with permanent improvements so that we don't exacerbate that deficit. To me, fiscally, then the question is, I think we need to really roll up our sleeves and start to plan on some of those larger ticket items like the theater. How are we going to do it? Is it a capital drive, for example? Is it a combination? Do we plan with some of the operating needs that we have for next year? Because again, I'm cognizant of that too. I don't want to overcook things and overextend when we know we have operating needs, just day-to-day light bills and staffing. I don't want to put us in a position fiscally where we're picking and choosing theater seats over kindergarten teachers, if that makes sense.
Well, I think, if you've been involved in any fundraisers or any asks, like either from a foundation or a grant fund, it's always very critical to make sure they're clear that it's not operational costs.
Correct.
That it's an ask for something above and beyond. And I think if you keep it to that structure, I think Tiffin has no troubles ponying up. I really don't. You got to get the right people in charge, like Bob and Lane Hunt. I mean, great people, and just they knew how to shake the trees and really just raise money. And then if you get the right person who spearheads either the auditorium or the stadium, there'd be no trouble getting the money. Just got to have the right people spearheading it. I think that's it.
And I would agree. I think those first two are extremely important to get done. And I would put the third one there. It makes no sense to run boilers 24/7.
Yes, that one's already happening.
Yeah,
That one's
that's
going to happen.
That
Good.
one's
That's good to hear.
So
That's already happened.
E, F, G, and H, those are already are already earmarked out of PI.
Yes.
Good.
So the pieces that you need decided on, the district needs decided on, are, so not doing the track really isn't an option. We eradicate a sport and something that is used community-wide. So it's which track we want to go with. And then if we are deciding to finance some of these other projects or not.
Yeah, I think so. If we did the auditorium and the track, we're looking at somewhere in that 3 to 3.25 range a year, which if we don't want to take it out of general funds, going to come out of permanent improvement, which is then going to potentially start to crimp some of these other yearly items like Chromebooks and bus replacement as well.
Well, so we have, it sounded like, and I could be wrong with my numbers, so please correct me. It sounded like we have $1 million a year set aside for PI. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
$1 million a year coming in revenue.
In, but we've already got about $500,000 of that earmarked with transportation and technology.
So that was what I thought I heard. So we have about, so
and that
all
was
of
my
these are
question. Does your technology earmarks already include the Chromebooks?
what it looks like.
Yes.
Needs to,
Historically,
yes.
So
yes.
right now, I think the track out of PI financed the auditorium because the Chromebooks, depending on technology, we didn't plan on that. We didn't budget for them. We just got them during the pandemic, but now it's going to
Already
be
in that, that's already in that $500,000.
right.
He's saying you should.
Okay.
So just to make sure I'm on the same page, are you saying write the check out of PI for the track or finance it?
Whatever way you guys think.
So what's our financing terms?
There's some options in front of us depending on the dollar amount, anywhere from 5, 7, 10 years. If we did the track just itself, we're looking at, let's say, 850,000, we'd be between 116, about 115,000 a year out of permanent improvement. And I think we could stomach that, given our revenue coming in and everything that's going out. I think we can accommodate the track with that. I do start to get a little squeamish as we go up towards that $3 million a year, and we're looking at maybe 350 to 390,000 a year. That's a pretty significant chunk of that $1 million a year coming in for the next decade that we've just earmarked for those items.
Well, and better off, we really should probably just say $500,000 that we
Yeah.
really have. Because $500,000 is already basically spoken for.
And that's these things on here. So E, F, G, H.
If.
Well, the ones
Chromebooks.
that are spoken for every year are G and H, Chromebooks and bus replacement.
Those are already in there.
Yeah.
I think you understand. So if we went up to financing 300,000, we've already encumbered about 500,000. We're giving them 200,000 a year to play.
So our wiggle room's going to be between
Without the-
150, 200,000 a year in PI for the next decade, assuming
Without your
everything
roof
stays
being
the
done in
same.
Washington.
Correct.
So do you have any idea, like, or are you factoring in like inflation rates on this? So what you think the next 5 to 10 years?
On the projects or the
Yeah.
financing? No,
I mean, because I don't know what was inflation, was 7% last year or something like that?
conservatively.
I mean, yeah, so, I mean, I like to take a loan at less than inflation rate because we're paying back with inflated dollars.
But if we did the spray track in the auditorium, not as uncomfortable?
Yeah, actually, the spray track is kind of what I had in my head, roughly 850,000, and then 2.2 million, let's say, puts us 275,000 a year.
What about that?
We can do it. It's not a question of can we do it. It's a question of what is the impact going forward then on other items that may arise.
Well, either way, we gotta have an operational levy coming up.
Agreed.
Yeah, so, I mean,
If we bake that into the operational
think you just
levy,
gotta
we
bake-
can always pay this off with that.
exactly, you gotta bake that in, I would think. But yeah, I generally don't like to borrow to buy things if I can pay for it, but on the other hand, this is a different kind of work. And you gotta ask for money at certain times, and if you're gonna ask, you better ask good.
I think we need to include these figures in that
I do,
ask.
yeah, I think that's it.
Pay it off and be done.
Yep.
Maybe make one payment, two, depending on structures of levy. I would be remiss if I didn't say, we have 16 million in the bank, you could write the check for the whole project. However, that's gonna really exacerbate our cash flow in the short term with that. I would not recommend doing that.
Right.
But I would agree with Dr. Gase. I think if we're gonna go bigger and do the auditorium and the track, we absolutely wanna factor those figures in when we go for an operating ask next year, in addition to what we need just for light bills.
So while we're at it, other than losing energy through heat loss on these doors, and there's no structural component to it as far as weight bearing, I don't think. So what do you think about the replacement of that? Where's our time frame there? Yeah, all these doors here, these are all like leaking at the bottom and rotting away.
Replacement with stone, remember that.
Right.
I think Ben's pulling it up.
The doors were expensive.
Yeah.
Just I gotta get my bearings northwest. All right, we're probably looking at just replacing the glass and the doors, that's not an extension, that's just replacement. We're talking about probably $200,000, thereabouts. That's just ballpark from what TDA has done for us.
Of the proposals that are coming forward, is that a component of any of those?
That's part of the 4 million of middle school renovations that we believe are necessary at some point in time. So yeah, I have a list of about that $3 to $4 million. That's part of that.
Yeah, because I saw the windows in there, and when did you think we really need to do the windows? That was a lot of windows.
But the roof at Washington can be done in phases, the middle school can be done in phases. Seems like
Correct.
the stadium's going to have to be addressed. Are there pieces of the stadium that can be done in phases?
Yeah. By the way, I do have window replacement here for the middle school is about $500,000. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's making more energy efficient windows. So we don't have water coming in them, and there's not a safety issue or anything else like that, but to be more efficient would be
Dr.
better
Gates, we
to
just
put
did
in.
the high school windows, right?
Yeah, we got some kind of, well, it's been about 8, 10 years. It was an
There
energy
was a House Bill
efficiency.
264 on that. We're
right.
getting ready to make the last payment, I believe, in December.
So, I forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead.
Are we able to get, and I'm not certain who is managing these pieces now, but with the roof replacement stadium improvement and the middle school improvements, can we get what a phase out of that would look like over, I don't know, because I don't know what needs to be done and what's going to need to be done. Like, is that something that we have a timeline on with costs?
So I think when we're talking about all of this, if we're going forward with a lease purchase option where it's a significant number of issues that we're looking at financing, then very bluntly, anything else would probably just have to be captured through a bond issue. Because we simply,
Our capacity to
our
repay would
capacity
be
is filled
maxed.
out.
I don't think we want to extend any more than we do here until we see what potentially happens next November, let's
So
say.
that's what I was going to think. Didn't we have an escrow account or fund for the middle school? Was that,
That's going away. There's an
There
improvement
is a
fund.
maintenance account.
maintenance account? Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
We just got our last payment on it.
Just over $1 million.
We have $1 million there to tap into, but what did you want to use that for?
It can only be used for the middle
Middle
school.
school.
It can
Right, well, I
only
think,
be used.
you know, again, I'm all about expanding academics, and if we can get this, you know, cafeteria fixed so that we can expand an academic programs for middle schoolers, that to me is high priority.
Some of these middle school pieces can come out of that fund.
Correct. Middle school can come out of that fund.
So if we went forward with a track and the auditorium, the pieces that are already baked into the PI, then the rest of the things we would have to roll into the
Bond
the
issue.
bond issue.
A bond issue at some point, yes.
Will those things hopefully ideally function until that point? Are there any that we have imminent worry would not?
It's hard to be able to answer that question. Do I think we could be okay? Yeah, I think so.
Gamble.
But it's a gamble. So there is no such thing as a guarantee.
Right.
That was the first thing that my grandfather taught me, is there is no such thing as a guarantee in life. So
But we don't have necessarily, the fire's not at the door with those.
correct. But I think this just highlights that we have a substantial number of needs that even if we go with an option and we bake into that, and I just want to make certain, and I might say it a different way than Mr. Cook did, if we take out a financing option, we are somewhat predicating ourselves and anticipating that our community is going to support us when it comes time to be at the ballot box. Because then if they don't,
We're on the hook.
we have exacerbated a situation that we are currently in. And so while I think these are absolute needs, one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up for a board discussion is that we need to be able to start communicating to our community that we have very real needs for things that our community has expected us to do, and yet we have limited resources to be able to do those things. So we can get creative and we can look at those options, but that's done with an assumption, and we all know what happens when you assume, but that's done with an assumption that our community will understand what we are doing and then support those efforts. And I just think that's a big conversation for us to have. And I don't want us to do that lightly, so that's why I wanted to be able to have a robust conversation about this, so that we could kind of get a sense of direction from the board as to what those priorities are, not just for the projects themselves, but there's a strategy about that. Because when we're talking about financing and all those things that Mr. Cook has outlined, yes, we can. It's like when you're in college and you get one of those great deals on a credit card when you're walking around on campus, and they say you can go buy free pizzas right now. Yeah, that's great, but at some point in time, you're paying off that pizza money, and you're paying more for a loan. I go back to what Dr. Gay said, and I typically agree. Typically, I like to just pay for things in cash. That's a better way of operating. Yeah, absolutely.
You only have so much expendable cash at some point.
Correct.
Month to month, and if we're making this commitment, we're not going to have it available for whatever the term of this. So,
But yet, that's how school funding is. You
Correct.
basically are always in arrears, eventually, right? I mean, it's like, you can't, it's baked into the system. So, I mean, I guess in a way, we're using that system essentially to get what we need now.
Yeah, we're trying to maximize our facilities
Yeah.
and manage that cash flow.
Right.
I will go back and as I've shared with the board last year, and it really is no change this year, out of the almost 700 school districts in the state of Ohio, only 16 of them spend less per pupil than Tiffin City Schools. We are easily in the top 25% for value added, which means we are growing our students. We're doing a really nice job with that. But at some point in time, that phrase, you can't get blood from a turnip, comes to mind. In order to make some of the improvements that we know we need to do, and the board knows we need to do, and that the community, from what I've gathered in my year being here, expects us to do, that takes more money. Because we are trying to get blood out of a turnip, and we're doing our best, and I think it's a testament to the work that the boards and administrations prior have tried to do to try to get, they keep squeezing and trying to squeeze a little bit more, but at some point in time, it's going to have to take the support of our community to help us move forward.
Problem is that, you know, it's very difficult to know where the cliff is. You know, you can, and this is what our problem has been. You take for granted excellence. You don't know how you got to be excellent. A generation's gone. Where did excellence come from? Well, we don't know. That was the previous generation. So you started to decline, and a gradual decline seems imperceptible. And you say, oh, aren't we great? Look at the value we're getting. We're the 16th least money spent. Aren't we proud of ourselves that we're getting something on the cheap? No, because beyond that, there's a cliff. It drops off abruptly. And at that point, you could lose your district. Really. I mean, people will bail on you. And, you know, with open enrollment, I mean, it's easy. There's all kinds of places that want our students or nearby. And
Mr.
it can
Richards?
happen pretty quickly.
Clarification, did you want the band instruments discussed as well, or no?
Oh yeah, I put that on there as well.
Because I know we were talking about the arts. That was 131 to replace those.
Yes.
And in terms of what Dr. Gage was saying, I think the community does take some of these things for granted, that they get to see the great band and don't understand that, yeah, we haven't replaced some of these things. And you're right, at some point you go to the cliff, you just don't have a program anymore.
Yeah.
You have either.
Yeah,
have
then
it
you
or
wonder
don't.
what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened? I wouldn't know, how did that happen?
And thank you, Mr. Perez, for bringing that up. So I asked the band program for high school and middle school to put together a list of band replacements for what they believe that they need. That's really $131,942, and you can see those costs outlined. For people that go, hey, I had to buy my kid's instrument, and that's true if you're getting a flute or a saxophone or things like that. But when you're talking a sousaphone, big marching tubas, you're going to see those aren't cheap. And we don't expect our kids to spend $10,000, $15,000 for a musical instrument. Typically, in almost every district, the school purchases those. So we allocate $15,000 a year for new instruments. Mr. Kissabeth will probably here shortly be able to tell me in how many years it would take for us to replace those instruments. I'm going to say it's probably around 12 or so, just doing English teacher math.
Yeah.
And by the time we get to 12 years, we're actually over the cycle of what we need to be able to replace those instruments again. Yes,
Math is not my thing. But it does seem like we are allocating not enough each year.
correct.
Is that a line that can be adjusted moving forward so that we're not constantly behind by, I don't know, 10 years?
We certainly could.
We're giving 15,000 a year, is that right?
Correct.
The
Historic.
band? Yeah, that's not anywhere close, but I don't think we can afford 131,000 a year either.
Right, so I don't think we can
But I'd like
afford
to see it
131, but it seems like if we're doing a nominal amount more, it reduces that gap.
I think, again, back to that November point, as we look ahead to some of these items, it's not just what do we need today, but what do we need over the next 3, 5, and 10 years to maintain so we don't hit that cliff. And I think that's where we need to bake those numbers in and say if it's 15, now it's 45, 50, 60,000 a year.
Right? I
We
mean,
can
this
do
just
that.
seems like we could have started to note this gap because I'm guessing that instruments get more expensive and all of those pieces, or we have more kids join it because we have an incredible band. Pick your reason, but it seems like this is a place that we could adjust. And in the grand scheme of our budget, that's a smaller number.
I could tell you this, if Mr. Richards came to me tomorrow and said he needed money for academics, I referenced $16 million in the bank. To me, we're not here as an investment bank. We have to educate students, and there's a direct correlation to that with the community. We're going to educate kids. That's always been my philosophy. We have operating needs regardless of that. So we've got to invest in what we're here to do, and that's educate kids. And then we can paint that narrative, create that story to go out and then hopefully sell that operating levy in the future. But we have to have the tools to educate the kids.
Right.
Band is education. It's a
Absolutely.
class. And
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
what you indicate is, I think we've done that for a while. We just sort of budget things, but we really don't budget to maintain it. And we just hope at some point it's going to somehow happen again. Because this doesn't even include, does that include the cost to clean the uniforms? Which is kind of expensive too. We do it once a year. Or if we ever were to replace them, I think the last time we replaced them was 1990 after the fire, I think is what I heard.
I think it was a
And those
fire,
were new
yeah.
uniforms too. So at some point, I think the community has to decide if you're going to maintain these programs. Yeah, but we're still funding at what rate from 19, and all these costs have gone up. So
Mr. Richards, what do you need from us? Do you need something from us this evening? I'm very uncomfortable with a vote without Mr. Williams here, but I'm curious what you need from us this evening.
I think I've got what is needed. I think we're going to get some hard numbers on these items. We'll really start to drill down the financing to put in front of the board. One question I'll have for Greg and the company is, I don't know yet if we need to bid the track, if they're going through a cooperative purchasing. That'll help expedite some of those timelines for us. So there's just some logistical pieces, but I feel comfortable from a treasurer standpoint, where I need to go to work now to get some things in front of the board for approval down the road.
I think we have to make sure we get that not nailed down so that we're not going to track 2025.
Yeah. So can I take a stab at what I've thought I've heard? Just to make sure I'm clear, is that there is a preference for us to do, I want to make sure I get this right, to do the spray polyurethane track and to do the auditorium improvement and to work on financing that. Is that the direction that the majority of the board is wanting us to go? That's what I thought I've been hearing, but I don't want to make that assumption either.
No, I think that's
That's a
the
fair
gist of it,
assumption
yeah.
to work numbers moving forward.
Yeah, we'll get things drilled down tighter for you. We'll put it in front of the board here at a future meeting with a lot more concrete.
So Mr. Goebel, yes.
It's with the OHSAA is get their thought on if you go with just a sprayed poly, if they're gonna, I know they like the facility, but if you go that route, if they'll want you to host.
I already have the answer to that, and the answer is yes. So we'd be okay.
You still be okay?
Yes. Thank you for that setup, though, Mr. Goebel. I appreciate that.
Mr. Cook, you feel as though you
I have one more question.
Yes.
If you do a spray, is the base still in the proper condition that you could put rolled rubber in 5 years or whenever you spray?
Yes.
Okay, so that's an option.
So what I
That's not ideal. If you're gonna replace the asphalt
Right.
now,
Yeah,
I mean, you're gonna be much better off to go with
Right.
the system that you have for the next however, but to answer your question, if you wanted to do an overlay in 5 years from now,
could.
a little bit more of a lift, but you could.
that base work with I'm not going to get
Yeah.
any of those words that you
Yeah.
use right, but the base work that mitigates the water problem, that's getting done regardless.
that's getting done regardless.
Learn as we go. Mr. Richards, do you feel like you have pieces you need from us? Mr. Kizabeth, you had thoughts?
And again, you know me well enough that I'll go with what we go. When somebody owes $1.2 million,
Yes.
we should get that money.
I do not dispute that, Mr. Kisbeth.
So we are getting shortchanged
Yes.
by the law system. And our taxpayers have to make up the difference. And so we're gonna go with a cheaper product because we got taken the first time.
I don't know if we're getting shortchanged by the system so much as we're getting shortchanged by this company.
Correct.
What was that?
I don't know if we're getting shortchanged by the system so much as we're getting shortchanged by this company.
Okay,
Who we've
well,
already paid.
whichever.
And now who has options and it's not looking.
I just don't understand how if there's a judgment for 1.2 million, there should be a judgment for 1.2 million.
There should be a payout of 1.2 million.
Because, Mr. Kisbeth, it's designed that way. It's how we have LLCs, it's how we have corporations. And that's why in purchasing this track, we need to be careful this time and make sure that we have protection up front. So at the end of the day, we're just like everyone else, so.
Any other thoughts from any other board members as we bring this discussion, I think, to a wrap where our leadership has directions to move forward? Any other thoughts or comments?
No, thanks.
All right, so
Okay.
we do not have any board action at this time.
No, but I think the plan would be then in our next meeting to have things that we can have board action on so that we can sign those contracts and get everything moving so that we can get it done within the allotted time periods.
And can you share that date so I can say it out?
Yes, it is 2 weeks from today.
23rd?
Yes, the 23rd.
Our next board meeting is October 23rd with a working meeting to precede it. With no other discussion being seen, I will call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Thank you.
Mr. Cook?
Dr. Gase?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Kizabeth?
Yes.
Dr. McBride?
Yes, thank you all for your discussion and for engaging with us this evening. Thanks for those who came, and we'll see everybody in 2 weeks.